Hello and welcome to The Current Thing with me, Nick Dixon. And we have another very special episode because we're welcoming back Rory Jacobs, aka Zoomer Rory, who many of you have loved, some less so, but we're excited to have him back. Now, we were going to have a massive guest this week who you were going to love, but we've rescheduled that, so hopefully that'll still happen. But Rory is a great replacement. Really, I shouldn't have said that, and I shouldn't have said the great replacement either, because that's a controversial phrase. I'll stop talking. How you doing, Rory?
I'm good, thanks, Nick, and pleasure to be here. And I'll do what I did last time. Thanks again to everyone who came over to my podcast. That meant a lot, as it always does. So thanks for being here. I'm very excited to get into it.
Yes, the Radical English Gentleman podcast. So we're trying a lot of things today. We're trying a different sort of format. We've got a new software program because my other one's not working. So it's all a bit of an experiment, but hopefully the listeners will enjoy. We like to just put out some content. I'm thinking maybe this podcast is just like a documentary of my life and I can just put out anything, you know what I mean? But I'm not we're going to get complacent. We have got topics. And today, actually, we were going to start with Lent as a topic, but hopefully not in a way that alienates our atheist listeners. I just annoyed an atheist on X, formerly Twitter, by posting a nice choral song about Jesus from the movie The Thin Red Line. It's like a beautiful Melanesian choir. It's one of the most moving songs you'll ever hear. This guy comes across like, did I ever tell you about atheism, Nick? And he just wants to attack me about atheism. And then he goes, well, you posted this. It's like he thinks that I'm proselytizing. It's like, it's my own timeline. It's a Sunday and it's a nice song that anyone can enjoy. What's wrong with atheists? Anyway,
pathetic.
So shout out to the atheists. But what we're going to talk about briefly is Lent. And actually, first, let's just find out, Roy, did you give up anything for Lent?
Good question. So I've given up going on my phone and social media, but it's a bit difficult when I'm kind of a social media, not manager, but I manage social media for a political organization. So it's difficult to give it up when that is my actual job. But I'm giving up social media in my life, maybe Instagram and Snapchat, because I'm not living in the moment. I'm checking my phone. I'm comparison and just stupid things. And I'm also giving up. I'm giving up that. Yeah.
That's interesting. You talk about living in the moment because I've been listening to a huge amount of Eckhart Tolle, and it's all about that. I have to listen to him when I go particularly off the rails mentally. I have to listen to a lot of Eckhart just talking about everything is in the now, and when the future happens, it will be now. When you think about the past, you think about it now. Have you listened to him?
No, I haven't, but I can relate to that logic, because I think, like, with me, I overthink everything I do. So I think you do it as well. You're a big overthinker and you're like OCD, so you constantly overanalyze from every angle, every little crack and cranny you're analyzing and that can really be crippling to a lot of things. It can also be a benefit in the sense you're like, when writing, I know you're good at writing things, that can be helpful because it expands your brain and you can really analyze and grapple with ideas from every angle. But from just living and enjoying things, it's quite difficult to actually be like, oh, I'm having a good time, let me not think about anything else here.
Sounds like Ron Burgundy and Anchorman. We are having a good time. Yeah, I mean, just as you were saying that, I was analysing, is this view too close on the video? Because you wanted the close view. I wanted the further away view. I've gone with the close one because I'm a nice guy, but I don't like I'm too close. I haven't got my good lighting. And that's what I was thinking when you were talking. Talk about overanalyzing. No, it's a curse of overanalyzing, overthinking. But Tolle, or Toll, I'm going to say it, pretty much says that everyone is like this. Almost everyone has this constant voice in their head, judging and commenting and so on. But that is a hard one to give up, is phones and social media. I mean, that's massive. You've gone big with that.
Yeah, I haven't because I uninstalled Snapchat before this, and I've been a lot more living in the moment. Been reading Mere Christianity, the quality book. I've been going in the sea, and that's been the most freeing thing possible because I've been so stressed out, overthinking things. There've been some things that I spoke with Nick off camera that I won't talk about here.
I'm trying to help you because it's not all moaning about Nick's mental health. We do sometimes try and help Roy, but off camera.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you can talk about it if you want, but some of it's quite private, isn't it?
Yeah, I won't bring it up. I think just because they might listen. I don't know.
Okay.
And going in the sea has been the most freeing thing because when you're in that mind of absolute coldness, you don't have the opportunity to think about anything in life. And I think those moments are the most freeing, where there isn't the opportunity for other thoughts to fester. And I do think that, like what you said about just taking it easy and living, like it's a very simple bit of advice to give people, like, oh, just live and like have fun. But it is actually a good bit of advice, really, because you can just be crippled by overanalyzing everything, can't you?
That's an insane bit of advice for me to give, because I don't do that at all. But it was in context of you worrying about something too much for someone of your age, and I was saying, see how it goes. And by the way, when he always says they might listen, he means the Jews. So, but yeah, that was a good bit of advice. How sage for me. That's funny, actually. Maybe we'll talk about that later. But I had that feeling the other day that, well, I've been through a horrible one of my mental health spaz out, if we can still use that phrase, which you definitely can't. And then I came out the other side of it to a large extent, and I just thought maybe life is just about experiencing. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's just like, here it is, you experience stuff, and that is the point, and that's it. And then I heard Chris Eubank Senior calling life a gift, and he just says it's this gift, and we're just here to use our imaginations and do anything we want, and it's just a gift. The meaning of life is that it's just a gift. And I was thinking about that. And yeah, so maybe that's where we're going. This is going to turn into a new age podcast at this rate.
I mean, I think
I laugh like Tucker Carlson then as well. Putin. Carry on.
Well, I agree with you in the sense life is a gift and it should be there to enjoy and cherish. But it's a line, isn't it? And it, like everything, it's the most boring thing ever, but balance is everything. So if you focus just on life being a gift and having fun, then that's just you as an individual, and you're not having a positive impact on anyone.
I didn't say having fun. Let's all calm down.
Yeah.
I said being a bit more present.
Yeah, like being present, like that. But then within that, you also can't really be present if you want to sustain things of like work or like, I don't know, marriage or family. You have to be thinking about the future, and everything has to be somewhat calculated. And if everyone's just living in the present, then they're only really focusing on themselves, because it's difficult to focus on other people in the present. And like what I spoke about in the other episode of individualism, it's that line between focusing on yourself and benefiting yourself and like other people, and actually what are you actually doing with your life, because it's a very thin line, isn't it, of becoming kind of an ego narcissist who just wants self-improvement to wanting to better the world. But then people use the argument, well, the best way you can help the world is helping yourself. And while I used to think that, I don't believe that anymore. Kind of going against Jordan Peterson a little bit there, because I think sometimes that can just be a cop-out for focusing on other people, because it feels good to focus on yourself. But it's difficult to really almost take the fruits of helping other people, focusing on other people in the moment. It's a lot easier just to focus on yourself.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did think about that when listening to all this Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle stuff. One slight thing is it's all about, it is quite individualistic. It's not, because it's getting out of the ego and it's getting out of your thoughts. And so it's just getting into the general consciousness that everyone shares. So in that sense, it's not. But in another way, they don't talk about societal duty very much in it. It's much more about it's people trying to cope with the difficulties of their mind and stuff. But he didn't talk much about society and the need to have children and things like that. So you might be right. I mean, that's always bothered me. That delayed gratification you alluded to is crucial, and it's one of the markers of intelligence. Famously, when you think about the marshmallow test, where could kids wait and get 2 marshmallows? They can have 1 marshmallow now, or they can wait longer and get 2 in future. And the ones that can wait are said to be the ones that will do better in life, because they can delay gratification. But the cruelty of life is that anything can happen, and you can suddenly die. So there you are planning, but it might all suddenly not work out. So it's very tricky. I've not cracked it, I have to say. But someone like me could definitely do with less. Depends who you are, doesn't it? Some people could do with a lot less overthinking and planning and strategizing, and some people could do with a touch more. I think certain people I've known in comedy who are just, a complete mess and do every kind of drug, maybe they could do with a touch more planning, or they've ended up with loads of children they didn't want. Maybe that's good, but some people can't plan at all, and some people just plan relentlessly. I'm more the latter. So I gave up for Lent Coke Zero. And I feel now, after 5 days of this, I feel I have a pretty keen sense of how Jesus felt in the desert when tempted by the devil. I was like, 5 days without Coke Zero. So I picked Coke Zero because, well, I realized it was actually the first day of Lent and I hadn't actually picked anything. So I just went bang, Coke Zero, because it's the thing I'm most addicted to. I drink it all day, every day, especially when after work. and I'm known at GB News for just having all these Coke Zeros, and I just would drink a ridiculous amount of it. So I was like, right, okay, it's bad for me, and it's going to be very hard to give up. So I'll give up Coke Zero for Lent. And now, aren't we? I think we're meant to fast on all these kind of things, aren't we? But I don't even know about that. Are we meant to fast? I'm at least doing the giving up something.
Well, I know some people do. I don't think it's like staple because and also what type of fasting, because you could do like intermittent, or because you're not going to literally not eat anything for 40 days. I'm not sure what the line is.
I've heard of a one meal thing.
Oh.
It's one thing I heard of. So yeah, people can tell us. I mean, we need to get Reverend Dr. Jamie Franklin on to confirm all these things. But and Lent also it's not necessary. It's one of those things. It's not necessarily in the Bible. I mean, it is, but it's a kind of it's a festival or whatever you want to call it, or a period of reflection based upon certain things in the Bible. One of them is in Matthew, maybe the main one. I'm just going to read it. This is turning into a Bible podcast, but I'm just going to read it. I think this will be interesting to everyone. This is in Matthew, and it's the temptation of Jesus. And it says, then Jesus was led up. Let me just read in a better position here so I don't mess it up. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And after fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. Makes sense. And the tempter came and said to him, if you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread. But he answered, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. Then the devil took him to the holy city and set him on the pinnacle of the temple and said to him, if you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you. And on their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone. Jesus said to him, again, it is written, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And he said to him, all these I will give you if you fall down and worship me. Then Jesus said to him, be gone, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. Then the devil left him, and behold, angels came and were ministering to him. There you go. So that's the temptations of Jesus in the desert. And it doesn't mention Coke Zero explicitly, but that was one of the things he would have offered him. And part of it is because he's in the. I've just managed to lose my bookmark. Part of it, he's in the desert where the stones apparently looked rather like loaves of bread, and he's saying, "Look, man doesn't live by bread alone." So that's Jesus kind of rejecting the base needs of the body and the kind of, you could say, hedonism, or maybe not hedonism, but the sort of basic needs that we're tempted by. Obviously, I mean, at a certain point, food is a need, but then there's also overindulgence in it. But then there's that bit with the temple. I've seen that just depicted as would you throw yourself off a building, because in theory God should save you, and it's just like a devil's trick. But I've also seen that as it's to do with power. Take him to the pinnacle of the temple is to do with political power, and that he's rejecting it because that's another temptation, is power. I mean, this is where we need a proper vicar. But then it says, then this one about showing him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. I suppose that's pretty clear. It's like that's just like the most possible power. Bishop Barron made a distinction between one of them is about power, one of them is about glory. I didn't quite totally understand the distinction, and the other one is about the sort of needs of the body and so on. But he rejects them all, and that is a lot of where we get Lent from. It's not the only passage, but that is one of them. Do you have any thoughts on that, Rory?
Yeah, I think it's something everyone can relate to, because in life, one of the biggest things to battle with is your own ego and temptation. And one of the key things of it is the fact that Jesus can give in and do everything that is being asked, but he doesn't. And that right there is the most powerful thing. And links in with, I link in kind of with what we see now with famous people, like especially men, because men, I would say the temptations when men become successful and stuff is far greater than women. I mean, people could say that's sexist, but I would say for a man it is. And because you often see men, leave their wives, or they shag loads of girls, whatever it is. But the most powerful thing is when men don't do that. I'm going to give a really cringy example right now, but Ed Sheeran, you could argue, is a bit of an example of this, because he's a man around the world who is absolutely adored. He sells out stadiums, biggest tour in history. I'm not even that big a Ed Sheeran fan. I do like him, but like, this is a man who is adored. People would worship his feet, right, just to spend a night with him. Yet he's got married and he has a kid. And that right there is kind of really I'm not saying living like Jesus, but it's one aspect of what the story shows us, in the fact that when you can have everything and you choose not to, you truly take kind of power from what you're doing more than anything, because to have the opportunity to indulge in these things and not to do it is you are like the embodiment of moral strength. And I'll dig on Andrew Tate here, but Andrew Tate's the epitome of the opposite, because he indulges in all these activities, but instead of resisting them, he gives into them. So he has multiple wives, he has multiple children, he flexes and flaunts his wealth wherever he can, because he's not doing the truest act of what Jesus would do, which is you have the opportunity to do it, you don't indulge in it. So for me, I take biggest inspiration from it in how Jesus lives his life, in the fact that no matter what you can do is a big part of your decisions. But it's, sorry, I'm absolutely butchering what I've said on my rant. It's like, to have the opportunity to do things but not to do them is the true power and morals of a man, not the man who does things because he can't do them. Because when you can do something, you don't do it. That's really the power. And it also links in with like the temptation of sex, of like so many things in life. And it really shows how incredible Jesus actually is.
Interesting. I knew you'd get a pop at Tate in there. I can't actually be bothered with a rebuttal, really, but he has transcended some of that. He's changing his attitudes towards women a bit, but yeah. Anyway, he's a Muslim, isn't he? So it's different. But yeah, interesting. Actually, Chris Eubank Senior was talking about a very similar thing to something you just mentioned there, where he was talking about the culture encouraged him to be a pervert, not like a nonce, but like encouraged him to. He said he was watching Carry On films as a child, and they encouraged perversion. And he also alluded to the trans thing being perversion, which I think was quite interesting. You don't often hear sports people talk about that. And he's like, "This is perversion," and he's like, it was a good point. And he said that he was tempted by all that stuff you've mentioned when he had the ability, when he was famous, he's still famous, but he had to transcend all that and unlearn all that, which is interesting. So yeah, and you also alluded to something that Peterson's talks about a lot, where it doesn't matter. It's not about people who can't. It's about being people. Somebody who could, like a strong man, is somebody who could hurt someone but doesn't. Not somebody who just can't do it because they're weak, which is interesting. And yeah, one other thing you said reminded me of that movie Funny People with Adam Sandler, where the guy Seth Rogen's character is judging him, and Sandler just says, "Oh, shut up! It's easy not to cheat when no one wants to sleep with you." So like, is it a good point? Like if you. Yeah, actual temptation when you could have things, but you reject them.
You kind of see that a bit with the red pill community. I find sometimes when people are like so anti-sex sometimes, but that's not coming from a place of like sacredness or godliness. It's come from a place of no woman will sleep with me, so fuck them. And then that almost anger and hatred towards women. It's not from a place of this is a grim thing to do and you're not loving in the image of God. It's I'm not, all women are rejecting me. I can't have sex with people, so therefore I'm going to hate them anyway. I do see that quite a lot in the incel community, I find.
Are you in the incel community? Is that
no?
you make it sound like you're in the forums and.
Yeah, I'm not, but I know people. I know like some men, for instance, in Christian circles, like at my church, who are really big kind of traditionists. But I know that I question it sometimes because I'm like, if you wanted to be the opposite, you couldn't. And I see that in how like people aren't attracted to you, whatever, or from an objective view, you're not. And that's difficult because then it's like, what is the true intent of that person? But I think when people have the opportunity to, then you can really test them. And like from Proverbs, I thought this is a good bit of Bible knowledge here. So yeah, from Proverbs, I found this really powerful in life. And I heard it when I was really struggling from someone, which is, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him and he will make your path straight. And I think this is powerful because it's like human understanding of what we want and desire is so, to us is so massive, but it's so tiny at the same time. And simply just knowing that what we know is inferior to a higher power, it gives you strength from whatever you're going through, may that be temptation or suffering or lust. Yeah, I mean, a very random thing for me to chuck in there, but I've heard that from someone who went through a divorce, and terrible things happened to them, and they got scammed and stuff, and they said that took them through it all, because from from his standpoint, his life was going to absolute shit and everything was falling apart. But if you push your understanding to something that isn't you and your own perspective, then you will seek true freedom and hope almost.
Okay, interesting. And by the way, we apologize for Rory's swearing there. While we're talking about Lent and the Bible, he suddenly launches into loads of swearing. He's very young. He hasn't yet given up swearing for Lent. I'm just, I'm just totally judging because I was swearing before we started, so it's quite shocking. But on the podcast, I don't. All right, very interesting. What about this Canterbury Cathedral thing, which is sort of now, in case anyone's bored of the Christian content, this is not just Christian. This is a kind of peak woke / Christian thing, which is Canterbury Cathedral had a silent disco, and this was, I mean, it's just openly just desecrating the cathedral, and obviously they're doing it to raise funds, and they're kind of open about it. But this is just a kind of another sign in the complete fall of Christianity in this country. Surely, what did you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. I thought when I saw it, I was like, imagine this was a mosque or something. Imagine seeing a silent disco in a mosque, or like, you wouldn't have it. People would not tolerate that. And when people speak about in the West, Christianity is sold out, I used to look at it and be like, yeah, I don't know if I agree with you and stuff. But now I look at it and I'm like, it's true. People bend over backwards to even have any kind of moral judgment or moral clarity to someone's actions or saying anything's right or wrong anymore in this kind of postmodern world. And now we got churches being used for discos, like how, and like the article you sent about how like something that's so sacred, even that now the church is selling out on. It's sold out on divorce or multiple other things, and now it can't even kind of obtain the sacredness of a building. And it's like at the temple with Jesus, when people are like selling stuff and flogging stuff, and he comes in rage, like, this is my father's house. I think you could almost extrapolate it to that.
Yeah, interesting. The article you're talking about is Bishop Robert Barron, and he has this article which is about Lent and about the cathedral, and he says, having visited Canterbury Cathedral a number of times, I knew that not at all far from where the nightclub scene was playing out was the site where St. Thomas Becket was murdered by agents of King Henry II in 1170. In other words, the present-day managers of the cathedral felt it was just fine that very near the place where one of England's greatest saints gave his life for the faith, a disco should break out. And he obviously points out that that's not ideal. And he's saying that cathedrals are not meant to be experienced on our terms. So someone who, the dean of the cathedral, talked about, it's always joyous to see them discover this incredible place anew and on their own terms, whether they're worshippers, sightseers, or attendees of events. So Barron says the whole point, of course, is that cathedrals are not meant to be experienced on our terms. They are meant to draw us out of ourselves into the contemplation of a higher world. They are designed to disorient us and to compel us to see things differently. When we allow a disco celebration to take place inside a sacred space, we quite literally desecrate the place. We render it unholy, for holy means set apart. Very interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was powerful when he spoke about how like a church is a different place from modern society, and to bring modern society and try to put it in the church, you're like ruining the only kind of beacon of tradition almost. Well, that's wrong.
Yeah. One thinks of the colloquial phrase "is nothing sacred." I mean, could you find a better example than this? I mean, shocking. Yeah, I thought it was pathetic, but I think everyone would just agree with us on that. It's uncontroversial almost. But then why does it keep happening?
But then I don't know. Some people would say, well, they're trying to bring Christians in, young people, because no one's Christian who's young, and no one's going to be brought in from a Sunday service of some guy droning at the front. Like, who are the young people really going to be running to that?
But it's completely wrong, isn't it? Because, of course, famously, young people crave discipline. They want structure. They want something they can be a part of. They go to something like boxing. It's very hard, but they belong to something, and the very bad side of it is they go to a gang looking for some sort of structure. So the church should be fairly strict and harsh, I think, and that's part of it. I mean, it doesn't have to be harsh, but it should be pretty strict and disciplined, because otherwise, what's the point? Like Lent now, you've given up something, I've given up something. What's the point if we just then immediately I drink a Coke Zero? That's completely pointless, isn't it? Well, no, you can have one or two a day in it. Well, I haven't given it up, have I? What's the point of it? So it has to be some sort of rules, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree. I guess to some people they say, well, it's clearly not working, so there's no other option.
Yeah, so you want to bring people in. This is the whole mistake of the Church thing. It's like, well, we'll water ourselves down endlessly to bring in people. Then what are you bringing them into? You're bringing them into bongo drums and acoustic guitars and nonsense. Even
Rainbow
though
Rhythms.
I love guitars. But no, it's always bongo. It is always bongo drums. That's like I can't go to the bongo drum churches. I remember thinking, where are the churches without bongo drums? And I looked into one. And it was in Muswell Hill, and I just looked through the door, and there literally were bongo drums. I was like, I thought I made that up. And I was like, so it's all like pop music. I just want the harsh ones. I mean, there's harsh and harsh. I want the church of my youth with the make me a channel of your peace and so on. But then some people think that's watered down and soft compared to, some sort of high Anglicanism or something. So anyway,
Well, what do you think of like evangelical churches?
Yeah, I'm suspicious. I mean, they're nice people. They're nice people. When I did that comedy show for Christians, as I've said before, probably the Catholics were probably the best laughers, then the evangelicals, and then the Church of Scotland Protestants were unbelievably miserable. And it was just like, oh, this is hard. So evangelicals are nice people. I don't like, as being an English person who's not that young either, maybe it's changed, but being an English person, I don't respond to all that happy clappy stuff. It just doesn't work for me, and I get uncomfortable. I even went to a church with Lois, our friend, and I liked it, but the songs were still too pop for me. She tried to assuage me by saying, well, no, these are actually ancient lyrics they've just put to the pop music. Like, okay, that's something. And it's in some ways more authentic than the hymns I listened to as a kid, because the lyrics date back longer. But they still put them into these kind of pop songs that everyone dances, and when the lyrics come on the thing, and I'm like, nah.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's more like a show than a sacrament, isn't it? It's more like I'm here to feel an emotion, not to kind of praise God. I do get that, because I go to one of those churches now, so I can see how someone can view that, because it's so like, the lights, the microphones, it's like, hands up in the air.
Yeah, exactly.
People are so indulged in how they feel. Like, that's such a core element. I feel the Holy Spirit. I feel this. I feel that. It's not like just saying things or I don't know, grappling with ideas. It's more just, oh, I feel this, dude. But I do like it though, because it is bringing people into Christianity. And as a young person, there's a time and place where that kind of certainty is a good thing, I think. And I find that, like, I've got drawn into those type of churches because of I don't know, the life it brings you. Maybe it's just me being young, and I understand part of that's kind of arrogance and ignorance of what faith is. But right now in my life, I feel like that's what I need.
Yeah, I'm not going to hate on it. You go there, a child was being christened there. It was great. People knew each other. There was songs. What's to hate? But for me, it's embarrassing because it's not my background and culture, and it's awkward. And so that's the problem for me. It alienates because I'm too English and I'm from the 80s. So which was more like the 50s. I mean, when you go, I've said this before, but you mentioned C.S. Lewis, so you probably watched the amazing movie Shadowlands. I say probably knowing you haven't watched any 90s movies because you're
I don't think I have watched that.
Well, after you've read Mere Christianity, you should watch it.
Right.
It's about C.S. Lewis, and you should also watch the Most Reluctant Convert, which is also about Lewis, which is a 1 hour monologue movie, which is really interesting. But yes, as I've said this before, but I realized that the time of Shadowlands is more like my upbringing, but we're in a completely different world now. But then I look chronologically when that's set. It's at the 50s, and since I'm from the 80s, actually, it's chronologically nearer than when I was born to now. I'm not explaining this well, but basically, of course, my life was more like that. Plus, I was in the country in Cumbria, so it was like being from an earlier century. So when I watch something like Shadowlands, where it's set in Oxford in the 50s, and they're all singing old-fashioned hymns and stuff, that's actually more like my upbringing and more what I think Christianity should be. But anyway, these are all maybe not that important things. They're sort of surface things, but they're sort of important. But I've just alienated all our atheist listeners. I said we weren't going to. We've just done a Christian podcast, basically. Oh, yeah. Well, it's Lent. It's a Sunday. Chill out, guys. Let's do one more Christian thing, but it's a crossover with kind of pop culture. It's this Girls Gone Bible.
I want a man 6'4", 6'2" is fine, or like a retired NBA player.
NBA player.
I just want somebody, like, I want his life to be the Bible. Like, I just want somebody who's so obsessed with the Bible and so obsessed with Jesus, and who understands, and like we said, like, who can teach us things.
Yeah.
Like, I want my dude to speak in tongues and have tattoos.
I just want a good man. Like a nice, classic man. I want somebody who will literally protect me and beat someone's butt if they need to, but also will sit there with compassion and just like a good-hearted man.
That's what a true man is. There has to be that dichotomy. It's the same thing with feminine women too. There's always a dichotomy, but there's a softness and a strength. And for men, being masculine is being able to beat someone's butt, you know, maybe not physically, but like being a protector and like doing what he needs to do to protect his family, but then also being soft enough to like be able to tend to his wife's feelings and like to be a good loving father to his kids. Like there's gotta be that dichotomy.
And this was a clip that was going sort of viral. It's got 3.4 now million views on X. Wow, I checked before the podcast, it's 3.2, so that is going viral. And it's these two basically hot chicks, there's no other way to say it, talking about the man they want. And this one says she wants a man 6'4", 6'2" is fine. She says, "Oh, that's nice. That's like 10% or less of the world." And retired NBA player, cool, yeah, loads of them. I just want somebody where his life is the Bible. Like, I just want somebody who's so obsessed with the Bible. What she really means is obsessed with her, I think. But imagine you had someone she's like, "I've got this guy who's obsessed with the Bible. Sorry, love, I can't see you today. I'm reading the Bible." How long is she going to put up with that? I don't even believe her. She wants this NBA player. He's 6'2" to 6'4". He loves the Bible. Later, she says she wants him to speak in tongues, but also have tattoos. It's like, who is this guy? So he's got tattoos. He speaks in tongues, loves the Bible, can slam dunk a basketball, obsessed with the Bible. And she talks about that dichotomy. She wants like a strong man. Oh yeah, she says later she wants someone who can beat a guy's butt, but then has a softness. So just to clarify, she wants a soft 6'2" to 6'4" NBA player, loves the Bible, can beat people to death, chooses not to, and just chooses to be obsessed with the Bible. And I don't know when he between his basketball and beating people savagely and reading the Bible, I don't know when he sees her, maybe once every other week or so. It just seemed ridiculous to me. And lots of people agree. What did I say? I just said it was about her narcissism. It just, to me, it's like, I'll just find what I said because it was probably brilliant. I just said, this was my like 2 a.m. tweets. I just said, some internet women seem to be using Christianity as just another layer in their impenetrable narcissism. I think I was onto something there. Basically, they've come up with this list. All women have a list of like what they want from a guy, and they've just added so many things to it now. And they've kind of like added Christianity. It seems to me, for some of these people, it's an extension of, it's another thing on their must-haves list, and it's something that kind of makes them even harder to reach. They're like, "Oh, I'm all these things. I'm a very high maintenance woman, and I'm now a Christian, so deal with that." It seems almost like a weird kind of status symbol, or I don't know. What do you think of it? What's going on?
Well, I agree with you. I think when I look at the rhetoric, like kind of she speaks about with what she wants, it reveals a lot about the type of person she is, not in a judgy way, but if she's so focused on these things, it shows, one, how godly is she in a sense of, if she was a wife, like, why is her focused on these things so much? And I agree with you in the list. I think for women, I think it's fair enough to have preferences and stuff. And I do think sometimes men do get almost annoyed at women sometimes with their preferences. But I would say like the issue I have with these type of Christians is they're so like, it's such a 2-year-old view of Christianity. It's like, I believe this is true. This must be it. But she like doubt or anything else with what this podcast talks about isn't there, and it's just a very immature way of looking at Christianity and God. And it's also weird to have someone kind of say that openly, because it's one thing for her to think that, but why would she be saying that openly? I don't know if there's biblical ex-NBA 6'3" people listed or what, but what are her intentions saying that? Is her intention saying that to make her look good, to reveal that she thinks she's worth a lot, therefore other people think she's worth a lot? Or is it because that? And I get what you mean about Christianity being another layer. It's like people view her as attractive and then chuck on Christianity to that, then she kind of feels virtuous almost about being attractive as well. So she's got all her bases covered, her spiritual side, how she looks, and just having that mindset. I don't know how you would attract a man like that, because any man who was like that, I don't know how they'd be drawn to someone that artificial and that vapid in the way they speak about men. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. If their life was the Bible, it's unlikely they'd have a load of tattoos. I don't know. Maybe they would. It's just unlikely. And it sounds like their life is NBA basketball. I mean, to get to that level, well, you can have people, sports people, who are very religious, Usyk and Tyson Fury and people. It does help to be. So that does go together. Yeah, it just seems. Yeah, you can be an attractive woman and a Christian. You can dress how you not dress that badly or anything, but they have a lot of makeup. That's up to them. It's like, I don't know. They're not very trad, but that's up to them. It doesn't bother me. But there's just something about it. Yeah, they wouldn't be saying that. I mean, really, they'd be focusing on integrity. Obviously, you've got to like the way someone looks, but the focus doesn't seem to be on integrity. If she just say, someone who's obsessed with the Bible and has integrity, you'd be like, yeah, great. But when you start going and they've got to be 6'4" and a basketball player and they have tattoos and speak in tongues, you just think this girl just. Well, I just see a lot of women making things impossible for themselves with their requirements and their kind of outlook. I just think it's unrealistic. It's not how life works to have such a stringent list of things you need. It just seems to be, like I say, narcissism to me rather than anything else. But
yeah, no, I know what you mean, because we got record amount of young girls in their 30s, for instance, who are childless, 50% now. Like we have more and more women getting to their 30s, not having kids, not being with someone, loneliness. So it's clearly not working. And you could argue that's the grass is greener effect a little bit, but also, like, if people are Christian, I don't know why their focus would be these things, because if you're really looking at what the Bible says and living a virtuous life, why would these things be so pinnacle to a husband? And I'm not saying people shouldn't be attracted to them, but I get what you mean about the list for them. Like, it's a very, just vapid way of looking at like attracting a man. And I'm not a woman, but I'm sure loads of Christian women would look at that and be like, what are they talking about? Or maybe they'd be like, yeah, I'm sure that'd be great, but like, and what you said about them wearing makeup and stuff, then it's like, what are they actually doing? Like, they speak with such authority about these subjects, but who the fuck are they? They're just two girls talking about Christianity with such certainty. I guess it is just narcissism at the bottom line. I haven't listened to enough of the podcast to really speak with that much authority about them, but from the outset, it just seems like such narcissism. And sorry, I keep on losing my train of thought.
Do you know what? It's because they're so hot. You're just looking at the clip going, I've lost my train of thought. Even though it's Lent and you've been tempted. But do you know what? I keep seeing them going viral though on X, so it's obviously working. I mean, marketing wise, it's a great idea actually. To be honest, I'd be happy to host that podcast on our network. I'd be like, yeah, brilliant. Like, this is a great concept. Hot girls talk about Christianity. I mean, it works in that way. It's a kind of inevitable development of podcasts. Really, it was inevitably someone was going to do that. So it's clever. It's a clever show idea. But we can just take the piss.
It's also like, if you're a Christian man, what you wouldn't really be that biblical if you were attracted to that type of woman, in the sense of like someone who wears loads of makeup, has so much ego, it runs this massive podcast, probably like super rich. If you're a super Christian man, why would you be attracted to that? I mean, I don't know any
That's always a problem with men when a woman has a massive career, and this is kind of problem Pearl always runs into. She's talking about being traditional. People sometimes say to her, well, hang on, don't you just spend all your time building your online profile? Like, it doesn't seem to be in keeping with a modest traditional woman. Some people will get annoyed about this, of course, but that is a bit of a thing. Men don't really care about women's careers. It's just what we're like, unfortunately. We don't care about if they have money. We don't care about their career. We only care about actually if they're pretty and have a good character and are kind of chill. That's basically it. That's basically it. I mean, let's be realistic. No man's ever gone, oh, I hope she has a master's degree. Or like, it's never happened. Hope she has a massive podcast. We're just going to see that as probably a negative, if anything. Yeah. Especially they haven't said, hope she has a massive Instagram that she posts to every day. That's like the worst thing.
Yeah, no, it's a brilliant point, because it's also from the biblical perspective, the man should lead the relationship and the woman should, submit in biblical terms. So it's like, if you have someone who, economically and career-wise is this massive personality, like, obviously money and stuff doesn't dictate your value and things of that nature. Like, modern society kind of tells us with what success is, but it's also the fact that, like, someone to be that focused on it means that they're not really like, are they really like a woman worthy of that almost?
Yeah. And just, I always feel the need to put in the caveat, I don't know what I'm doing, and my relationships have been disasters. I always feel like I have to put that in. And it's the second week in a row we've had, well, second in 2 weeks where we've had someone say the woman has to submit. I got one angry ex post about that from our episode with John Sonmez, when he just said, man has to lead, it's not in a misogynist way, but that's just how it is. And so the woman has to submit. And someone say, how he's a Neanderthal. It's like, not really. He's a very smart guy, but and a nice guy. But yeah, some people don't like that. Go on.
Yeah, and it's not saying as well like women should just give out fucking like, sorry, I was swearing again. It's not saying that a woman should just submit to some random man who she finds like, oh yeah. It means that in like the most sacred loving relationship possible, in a non-abusive way, there's a power dynamic with your relationship and how you treat each other, and how, like with God, like there's a father figure. Like my grand's relationship with my granddad, it was like he led the relationship. He was like her father almost, and that in spiritual terms and biblical terms, from what I've looked at, seems to be the most fruitful way of actually building a relationship. And it's not to say that it's abusive, because obviously it can be abusive, but no one's advocating women should just submit to some scumbag abusive guy. Like, nobody's saying that. We're talking about good men in a good stable relationship through the love of God. That's what, when people talk about submit and that, because I wouldn't, for instance, like, you bring it back to people, like your sister or your mum. Would I want my sister to submit to some God? I wouldn't. I'd be terrified that they'd abuse her or whatever. But in the sanctity of marriage and through the blessing of God, then I think it is right. And it's a beautiful thing when a woman can kind of truly trust a man in that respect.
Yeah. A lot of people think marriage doesn't work anymore, don't they? Especially on the internet. And there was a guy, a former guest on this podcast, Tanner Guzzi, who's a great guy. He's a Mormon, or Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, as I think they prefer to say. And he has he's got a 7th child on the way, and he's just had a divorce. He's going through a divorce that he doesn't want, and his wife wanted a lot. And that he talks about it online, and a lot of people said on X, so this is proof that marriage doesn't work. If even this guy can't make it work, cool guy, really dedicated to his religion and so on, and so is his wife ostensibly. So pretty depressing. I mean, we could talk about that another time maybe, but it's a whole big debate, isn't it? Is it still worth getting married? But I'm suddenly thinking maybe we've done so much religious stuff and we've alienated our political people. Do you want to talk briefly about the Tory by-elections and whether they can survive? They got spanked in these by-elections, and Reform took a certain amount of the vote, but the biggest takeaway really was that people just didn't turn out. Was it especially Wellingborough, where just 20,000 people, the Tories got 20,000 less votes than last time, and it was basically just people, the classic thing when the Tory voters rebel, they just don't show up, they just don't turn up, and that seemed to be the main takeaway for me. Did you follow this?
Yeah, so I was actually campaigning in Kingswood in the by-election, just trying to get people out and vote. Went around with a megaphone, had door knocking, hand out leaflets in the city centre and stuff. And it's unbelievable how politically unengaged people were. And I understand that with Kingswood, because the constituency is actually getting dismantled and it's broadening out, and also it's a complete waste of money because it's like 6 months. But yeah, people just do not care. Like, it was like, I think 38% in Kingswood or Wellingborough, I'm not sure. And about Reform, it's impressive that Reform managed to get 13% of the vote in Kingswood and Wellingborough. But the thing I kind of realized campaign there was how, how set in people's ways are. Like, I would speak to people and they'd be like, oh, this is the worst government I've ever seen in my life. I've never seen a worse Tory government. I've voted for Tories my whole life. What are they doing? This is I couldn't have been any worse. And I'll be like, who are you voting for? And they'd say, I'm voting for Tories. And while people look at what's happened with Reform as like, oh, isn't it great? People are now showing up for Reform. You also still had loads of people voted Tories. Conservatives came second in both. I still cannot believe that there's people voting for just nothing every time. And it, like, when I was there, I was like, it's so difficult to actually make political change happen. And even with Wellingborough, Ben Habib says he's going to stand again in Wellingborough. And they did do well. They got 13%. It was impressive what they did there. Almost 4,000 votes. Like, impressive stuff, but they stand again. They're going to need to gain almost all of the Conservatives' votes to win. And they might come second, but what use is that? Labour are just going to win. And I think it's great we've seen this rise of reform, but also with these by-elections, it kind of made me realise how stuck we are with political change and how even to this day people are stuck in their ways.
Yeah. The thing I was referring to was, so the post was Labour wins Wellingborough as they overturn a huge 19k Tory majority. But academic agent here had posted it. His account is OG Roland Rat, and he said can't get over minus 24,869, but only plus 107. So the Tories had 7,408 votes, which was a minus of nearly 25,000, whereas Labour just went up very slightly. So he says 20,000 plus people just refused to vote. So that was really the takeaway. So it's people just disgusted with the Tories. But as you say, some still do vote for them because they are our most successful political party, most successful in Europe or something? One of the most successful political parties ever. So they do have that hold on people, and people are terrified about Labour. But I don't think that works anymore. You'll get Labour, which is they're still trying that. It worked for Corbyn, the Corbyn era. You'll get Corbyn, so we'll vote Boris, and it did work. It doesn't really work anymore because people are just so disgusted by the Tories. I mean, I don't know what you would advocate, but didn't you not vote? Didn't I attack you for not voting?
Yeah, I'm not voting.
Yeah. I mean, so that's didn't you say you campaigned for people to vote and then you didn't vote yourself?
No, but I'd spoil my ballot. I'd still vote, but I'd vote for no one. I'd just do like none of the above. I'd write that.
No, that's not going to work either.
You're still voting. You're still using your democratic right. You're just saying I'm not voting for anyone. You're still using what is to be part of democracy. You're expressing your right. But
how can there be no party for you, Roy? Isn't there some libertarian party you could vote for?
Yeah, I do like the libertarian. I would vote for the Libertarian Party. I do disagree with them on some things, but maybe I'm a bit of a puritanical guy when it comes to things. I kind of need everything to be aligned, or I can't really give myself to it.
Yeah, that's not the process. We've had this before. We've been through this argument before. It's just not how it works. The Tory party. I mean, your views are so mental. They'd have to be pro-immigration, although now you're more anti-immigration. Be anti-Trump, but also be very Christian and very socially conservative on some things, but not on others. I mean, there's no one in the world has your views. I mean, it's just an absolute random.
Yeah, but I'm tempted. I am tempted by the SDP a bit, to be honest. I like what they're doing with a lot of their traditional views on things. I like their kind of left-wing economics on some things, like taking back manufacturing. I do like that because they're legit people who aren't kind of like reform. I did like them a lot more. I thought they were kind of going somewhere, and then I kind of looked into more of the people actually running what they say, and I'm like Rupert Lowe, for instance, in Kingswood. If you actually look at what he says, it's kind of just standard conservative policy on of people on benefits. We need to take money from them, not kind of address. And I had him on my podcast to speak to him, and big credit for him to actually do that. But what he actually came out with was one of the solutions we can have in the UK is stopping people on benefits. And it's there's record people on food banks, more people paycheck to paycheck, and kind of the go-to thing is people on benefits. And yeah, there are people on benefits, and that is an issue. But if that's kind of the crux of solving poverty in the UK, you've really got a terrible perspective on things.
Yeah, that's fair enough. On the issue of, who would you vote for? I mean, I might vote Reform to send a message to the Tories. I think we're at that point. You have to send the message. You can't just vote for them and say, well, we want to keep out Labour, because we've learned there is no difference. The Tories have the same agenda as Labour. Yes, Labour will be worse. They'll be more aggressively woke. They'll be terrible on social issues. I have said repeatedly they will be much worse than the Tories. That is clear. But the Tories still won't do anything good that you want, to the point where you can't vote for them now, even if it's. Because what would you be voting for? You're going to get mass immigration. You're going to get wokeness anyway. It's in all our institutions. They're not going to stop it. They're not going to stop anything. They're not going to do anything conservative. They're not going to do anything you want. They're still in the Blairite paradigm, as Carl Benjamin calls it. David Cameron was the heir to Blair. So you're voting for I said in one of my posts, they're all the Tony Blair party. I even said every party since 97 has been the Blair party. I mean, Cameron was Blair. Theresa May is just Blair. Some people said Boris wasn't Blair. You could argue, obviously, Gordon Brown is just the Blairite agenda. Starmer's Blair. He's actually literally going to have a leadership manual handed to him by Tony Blair. So they're all Tony Blair. That's all we've ever had since 97. So no one's actually come out against that. So what we need is an actual opposition to that, which won't win is the problem. I mean, we won't have the numbers to win because we have this very ignorant professional Remainer class who are incredibly dangerous. Nice people when you meet them, great people, but you meet them and they're just, their complacency is unbelievable. I mean, their worldview is so warped and strange to me. It's the kind of Carol Vorderman worldview, like as if Labour are going to be good. You know, it's completely absurd. So, and they're not reckoning with the real problems of the country, immigration and so on. So then you have a few of us who are aware that the country's basically destroyed, and we're thinking, what can we do about it? But no party represents us. So yeah, that's where I think we have to. But something's going to happen after the election. Some break-off party. It'll be Reform, or it'll be the rump of the Tory party on the right. I don't know. It's going to have to be something new because the Tories are going to get absolutely obliterated, as these results show. What do you think will happen? We talked about it before, but in the wake of these by-election results, what do you now think will happen after the general election?
Also, one about the by-election is quite funny. We were at Kingswood with Rupert, and Rupert's big policy was slash immigration, right? And he had multiple people come up to him, attacking him on immigration, calling him too weak and stuff. It's hilarious because they were saying like we need SDP, we need to completely pause immigration for a generation. So that was interesting to see. I'd say, based on what I've seen, I'm a lot more pessimistic. I actually thought they'd come second. As Reform said, this is a 2-horse race, us v Tories, no Labour, and it didn't. So I'm a lot more pessimistic, even though Reform have come out and been like, oh, we hit 13% or whatever. I think that Labour are going to absolutely dominate. If Labour can get one of the biggest victories ever in a Tory Brexit stronghold, Reform can't even come second. What's going to happen across the country? It's going to be just like decimated. Everywhere is going to be Labour. I saw a recent poll. I don't know how credible it was, but it said it could be the worst Tory defeat ever, and Rishi could have 80 MPs or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised, because when I go out there and I see how broken it is, and I see Labour, they're in a constituency where all these scandals are happening with Labour. In Rochdale, you got Gaza going on, all these scandals, everything. You got Reform, who should be doing amazing, capitalising this. They can't even come second, and Labour are just absolutely crushing it with a pathetic leader who does a U-turn on everything. Once Keir Starmer actually releases his manifesto and has something that he could actually say, this is what I stand for, he's going to do even better. And right now they're doing amazing somehow, when what they actually stand for is nothing. They've U-turned on everything from Gaza, green investment, everything. And they're still doing this incredible. I'm a lot more pessimistic after this. And also Reform are just going to split the vote everywhere, which I like them doing, because you've got to stand for what you believe in. And I hope Richard Tice wins in Hartlepool. I hope Nigel wins if he goes in Essex or whatever. I hope he wins. But I think the Labour are going to just cruise to victory even more now, because if Reform can't come second, then that's it, really.
The big question is what would happen with Reform if Farage was leader, and that's the big thing. I just don't think anyone connects with Reform. Tice is perfectly nice, but they don't really register with most people who aren't really political. And whereas Farage does transcend that. He was on the jungle. He's just a massive figure. He would transcend, and that's what we haven't seen. So the disappointing results of Reform are because Farage isn't involved and he's biding his time and waiting to see what to do, isn't it? But that would be, I think, they would be a serious threat with him.
I mean, they are a serious threat now, in the sense they're going to decide the election. For instance, in Wellingborough, if Reform didn't stand, the Tories would have probably won because of I think it's Wellingborough, because of the difference in votes of 4,000 nearly. So it goes to show that it will also be a double-edged sword, because it's they have to either win or Labour win in every place they stand. And there's only probably going to be 3 seats where Reform can actually win in and actually come first. And then all the others, they're just going to dilute the vote, so Labour will just definitely win. Because even if it's 1,000 or 2,000, or even just a small minority, that will chip off Tories, who have a tiny support anyway, and they'll be completely screwed. And that's why Rishi, when addressed the by-elections with Reform, he didn't even say don't vote Reform because they're bad, they got bad policies. He just said a vote for Reform is a vote for Labour, because he's got nothing on him. And it's kind of that pathetic that the Tories are in that much state they can't even criticise Reform. They just say, oh, it's a vote for Labour. That's all they got.
Which, as I said, worked for Corbyn and it won't work now. Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, reforms still do dictate in that way. They can make a bigger impact with Farage. We talked about it before. Without proportional representation, there's only so much you can do. We're in a real pickle. I mean, the fact that so many people in the country think Labour is a solution is so mental and deranged. It's just like, oh, we've tried the blue one, let's go back to the red one. It's like, I mean, as Morrissey sings in the track I play when I walk on the Weekly Sketch Live, I've been dreaming of a time when the English are sick to death of Labour and Tories, and that's it. We don't seem to get sick of it, but I mean, it's going to be so horrendous. Carol Vorderman had this tweet or little video that was sort of going semi-viral, talking about what will be the point of GB News if once the Labour win, which is the most bizarre point. I mean, because obviously the point of GB News becomes even more relevant because they can critique the appalling Labour government, as it will surely be. It was a really, really strange, moronic point. So I dissed it and got a few likes. What will the purpose of GB News be once Labour are in, Carol asked. I said one purpose will be to call out what will no doubt be a horrendous Labour government. I also hope these people are ready for whatever replaces the Tories, unless they actually do the gulags. Real Conservatives are not just going to disappear. That's because in the clip, they're sort of gleeful about obliterating the Tories and obliterating GB News. And it's like, where do you think all these people are going to go? We may not be a majority to win an election, but there's a huge number of people in the country who hate the Tories for not being conservative enough and hate Labour. We're not going anywhere. So, what does she think is going to happen? GB News just quietly shuts down. We all disappear. No.
Yeah, I mean, pathetic point, because even like you see with everything, it's easier to criticize than to be in government. So it'll be the inverse. It'll bolster it because they won't be in government. So they can just criticize and rinse the shit out of the Labour government without being in power. So it's way better.
Yeah, she's presumably referring to the slightly large number of Tory MPs or former MPs on GB News, and she sees it as some sort of Tory town. But again, they would just become more relevant again because they would have their platform to be the opposition. So it doesn't make any sense on any level. But this is her fantasy. GB News was shut down. Doubt she's even watched it. But here we are. But people were nice about you. We had a really nice review about you, actually. Maybe we'll just end on this. We had some nice feedback from the previous episode. Someone said, great conversation, open and honest and very easy to listen to. We'd gladly listen to many more of these. And for what it's worth, Nick, others may not agree, but I'm just as happy with you chatting to someone like Rory as I am when you have a special guest. Maybe you could have some interesting, relaxed, informal chats like this with some of the people from GB News as well, with a fairly light agenda so that it can flow freely. Yeah, thank you for that one. That was on YouTube. Yeah, we have had Paul Cox and Leo Kirsten. It's quite similar. So we're still working out all these different formats. We're definitely going to do a format with Rory. We'll do guest format. We'll do the comedian banter format where it's topical banter with like Leo or Paul if they'll do it again. And then maybe we'll do the Rory the Zoomer format where, or Zoomer Rory, I haven't decided, where we talk about politics or we talk about whatever. I don't know. And we might be doing it in a studio as well. I think we'll have all sorts of options. But there is another review that attacks you, Rory, but we don't necessarily need to read that. It's very, very long. It's extremely long. And it ends with God bless. Huh?
What about a little bit of it?
Oh, yeah. It says, Nick is great and very amusing, and there hasn't been a dud on this podcast until the Radical English Gentleman, hence the 5 stars, meaning that despite you, Rory, we still get the 5 stars. What a depressing example of our youth. Are you sure I'm going to be seen as such a bully reading this after everything I've just said? But I know that you can take it. Because you've told me and you've asked me to read it.
Yeah, I mean, if I had it on your scale, I would suffer, I'm sure. Like, didn't take away from you, but I get kind of abused in my own circles a bit. I'll just have a bit of it. Also, I think it's healthy for me, dissolves my ego and stuff.
It says, if this is what a base Zoomer looks like, we are effed. As Nick rightly pointed out, Zoomers are totally ignorant of anything pre-2010. His reaction to Enoch Powell was where it all went wrong. He's imbibed the notion that Powell was some sort of knuckle-dragging racist instead of one of our last intellectual politicians who could read and write ancient Greek. Powell was entirely right in his predictions about the impacts of mass immigration. So you're not right-wing enough for this dude. And he goes on about that bit. And then he talks about Trump as well. You definitely got some heat for the Trump stuff. The Trump derangement syndrome of this boy took him to a place where he said he'd vote for Biden. This after a rant about the dangers of degeneracy. Biden is the most pro-abortion, pro-sterilization, and mutilation of children president the US has ever had. There you go. So, and there's a lot more. But then it tells me to go to church, which is fair enough. Some criticisms of Rory there. Hey, I think you're very impressive. I think what people should do. Here's my little advice for the reviewers with Rory: do what you want, but try not to judge him against who you are now. I still would judge Rory against who I am now and say he's a better person, but judge him against who you were when you were 20, and then it's really like you were probably an absolute bleep wit. I won't swear like Rory, but you were probably a total mess at 20. Most of us were. Rory's only 20, so if you gauge how well Rory's doing, how smart he is and put together versus your 20-year-old self, you might think twice about a nasty review. But it's up to you. I mean, the review wasn't that insulting. It had some points, a bit engaged with your points. I don't think it was as nasty as some of the ones I've had, but. What do you think, Rory?
Yeah, I appreciate criticism. I think that's a good criticism of me with Biden. I preach for this traditionism, but then he's like super pro-abortion and stuff, and like really woke. Then it's kind of, you could argue, well, I've got a contradiction. Well, I mean, when I said that, my argument would be I would never vote for Biden, but if I had to pick, I would vote for him over Trump because I prefer. I won't go into it, but democracy rather than. But yeah, fair criticism. I mean, look, I'm a completely flawed character. I got endless things wrong with me, endless things that I do wrong, hypocrisies, ego. I got so many issues. I never want people to get across that I'm some sort of like fucking up myself, preachy Christian guy who thinks he's Jesus in the 21st century. I'm really not at all, and I'm very aware I'm an unbelievably flawed character. But I always appreciate criticism. And as I always say to anyone who says anything to me, I love you and I hope you're having a good day.
That is amazing. You can do that. You just reply. I can't always reply like that. Well, ever. So that is great. Yeah, that's always reply. I love you. You see, he's a good kid. Let's be nice to Rory. Thanks for anyone who's still listening this far. I mean, only the absolute hardcore at this point. We're going to get some big guests again. I'm just trying to get out something every week. Hope you enjoyed my interview last week with Ed Dutton. That was another thing I thought I'd just give you because that was behind a paywall previously. You know me, this podcast, we're still experimenting. There's so many different approaches, but we've had some amazing guests as well. We'll get some more in future, and we'll get more Rory, and you can review him and hopefully be nice. And go to the Radical English Gentleman podcast for more Rory. It's on Spotify. It's on, what else is it on, Rory?
It's on Apple. It's on Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iTunes. It's everywhere. Just exclusive announcement. I have a new show starting on the 25th, which is going to be, it'll be on my podcast. So go over to the Radical English Gentleman, but it's going to be something completely different, kind of spiritual culture in the UK with a guy called Steve. It's going to be absolutely class. So go over 25th, the first episode of the new show is happening. And also, sorry, I'm absolutely plugging the shit out of all my stuff here. But also, if you are interested in my views, do follow me on Twitter because I have a absolutely minuscule community there. So it's Rory at Rory Podcaster.
Podcaster.
Yeah. ER.
At Rory. Yeah, I find it hard to find your account. So at Rory Podcaster on X, formerly Twitter. Yeah. Go there, support Rory in his minuscule community. And we'll have more developments in future. But for now, if you want to help me out, go to buymeacoffee.com/NickDixon. Buymeacoffee.com/NickDixon. Leave a little donation, leave a comment. I'll reply to you unless it's very, very rude. And nickdixon.substack.com, where I've been posting a lot more until I had my little spaz out, but I've posted about loads of things in January, so there'll be loads more posts. nickdixon.substack.com, £5 a month, or buymeacoffee.com/nickdixon, and we appreciate it. I know there are loads of things to subscribe to these days, and I've got basedmedia.org as well, so it's all getting very complicated, but it's all appreciated. We're just going to keep the lights on here, and God bless, and we'll see you again next week.